Hello, and welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where maybe we'll just sit here and bleed at you. I'm Hugo, and the people I'm eating with this week, as usual, are my co-hosts, Jeff Grizz, the kingpin of all things movies, and Josh Bradley, our hard-boiled investigator of cinema.
Why can't I be the kingpin? I was going to say, Josh strikes me as more of a kingpin, and I'm...
You can switch it around.
Yeah, Josh, you can be the kingpin.
But you know,
I'm also not an investigator.
Grizz, you're like, yeah, but you're like you're such a positive, nice person. You can't be a hard-boiled detective.
I know,
you need to be a bit more jaded for.
But he can be a kingpin.
Yeah,
but kind of a twisted,
kingpin.
A twisted
yeah,
kingpin.
the kingpin, exactly. The kingpin is still kind of more of a cheerful guy in the movie than the detective is. So,
I'm the Michael Clark Duncan kingpin. I'm the Ben Affleck Daredevil kingpin.
Yes. Okay. You can do that. By the way, I'm watching Daredevil right now. Good show. So this week's episode is the first of a 3-part series, I guess, in which we are each going to pick a film to remember based on our most anticipated films of 2022. So since it was my turn to pick this week, and one of my films was Knives Out 2, I chose to do a discussion of Rian Johnson's first film, Brick, which we'll get to in a minute. Also, it's our 50th episode today, so go us! Congratulations!
Isn't that crazy, Josh?
It is pretty crazy.
That's wild.
And thank you to anyone who listened over the past year. It was a highlight of my year personally. Whatever the amount of viewership or anything that we got wasn't really the point for me. I just had a great time every week getting to talk about movies.
Me too.
For you guys. Yeah. So it was awesome.
I care about viewers and listeners. No.
Sure. So please follow RTF pod, RTF_pod on Twitter.
I swear to God, Hugo, I will come to Italy and smack you.
He's in England.
That's fine. I'm in England now. So
I will come to Italy, search all of Italy high and low looking for you, and then go to England and smack you.
Okay, that's fine. That's more accurate. So anyway, as we've been doing for a while now, we'll do a little segment at the beginning where we just talk about what we've been watching. Usually it's the past week, but we didn't do it last week, so it would be in the past few weeks.
We did an episode last week.
Yeah, but we didn't do what we've been watching.
We had to hurry.
That's
right. Because someone was on schedule last week.
Yeah.
That's my bad.
So Josh, I'll start with you. What have you been up to this week? What have you been watching?
Sure. Well, I revisited a couple weeks ago. I revisited both Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Wolf of Wall Street, just kind of like on a whim. Man, those are two great movies, and Leonardo DiCaprio's two best performances, I think, in those two, easily. I finally saw Being the Ricardos. That's just not very good, is it?
That's what I was saying.
It's just not very good.
It's fine. I think it's fine. It's even. I'll even say I enjoy it, but I only enjoy it purely because it's Aaron Sorkin's writing.
Yeah, you and I are marks for that. We've talked about that numerous times in this podcast, but that's, I don't know. I think you missed the mark on that one overall.
It's not enough to carry that film.
Yes. I revisited, after we briefly discussed in the podcast last week, I revisited Ex Machina. Still rules. Still a great movie. And then this past Thursday, I just had myself a little day. And Thursday night, I had tickets to go see Jackass Forever with a couple friends on opening night. Oh, yeah. And so I spent my day on Thursday rewatching Jackass Part 2, Jackass 3D, and finishing the night off with Jackass Forever in theaters. And that was a great day. I really needed that day. And
I've been meaning kind of I would like to go to see Jackass, but I feel like going by yourself is kind of not the point of that. Like, if I had a friend to go with, I'd go in a heartbeat.
I would have gone by myself. Luckily, I didn't have to, but I was fully prepared to go by myself. I know this is not unique to me, but the Jackass movies are pretty special to me and very nostalgic for, being in middle school and high school and watching.
Another foundational text for Josh.
Well, no, I appreciate you making fun of my foundational text and everything, but in a different way. It's something I used to watch with my dad and my brothers, and so hearing Johnny Knoxville say, "Hi, I'm Johnny Knoxville, welcome to Jackass," put a few things put a bigger smile on my face than that.
Very nostalgic.
So yeah,
from what I've been hearing about the movie, it's like the movie itself is kind of more self-aware and a bit nostalgic about itself than the other ones have been, right?
I mean,
A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the third one was also like that. I mean, the third one ends with the credits of the third one is like black and white pictures of them when they were like in their early 20s, and then pictures of them now. So the third one's also very nostalgic. So they'd been doing it for 10 years at that point, but now they've been doing it for, another 10 years have passed since then. So you're right that 3 and 4 are both very nostalgic, but
it was also
I
like
think it's appropriate.
I mean, Hugo would have been too young, but like it was, especially for young men, it was a cultural phenomenon when Josh and I were in like, junior high and high school.
Absolutely, yes, and it was a big deal, and I really loved it then. I love it now still. I finally watched Pig. That's a good movie. Our guy Nick Cage. I think I had high expectations just because I'd heard so much great things about it for the last like almost a year now, because it came out in like May of last year. It's really good. It's just pretty simple. I guess it's deceptively complex, but you need to like peel a couple layers back to get to the complexity, I guess. And then I watched Brick, and that's it.
Awesome.
Well, good.
What about you, Grizz?
So I was talking to Hugo. I didn't realize just how little I've been watching movies over the last few weeks. So like I have almost exclusively been watching television shows. So I'm not gonna, obviously this is a movie podcast, but TV is movie adjacent. So I've been watching Peacemaker, which is the spin-off from the Suicide Squad movie, still directed by James Gunn. And I gotta say, like it started off, I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I'm kind of into it now, especially Josh, if you haven't watched any of this, it's given me a lot of Slither vibes. So I think that as you are a big fan of Slither, that I would suggest you go ahead and give Peacemaker a shot. I've also been watching the Legend of Vox Machina, which is the Critical Role animated show on Amazon Prime. Critical Role is a D&D podcast / show. So I was excited to watch this show, and it's very, very good, but it's an animated show. It's a lot like Invincible as well in terms of like the brutality and stuff. So if you're into that, it's pretty good. After I finished watching all the episodes of Peacemaker that were available, I went back to watching Titans, which started as a DC Universe TV show about the Teen Titans, but they're older, and
right.
It's good. It's like parts of it is it's way too much. Trying to be edgy.
Edgy, yeah. It looked like
especially in the first season, there was just a lot of like throwing in swear words just to be freaking cool, man. Cool kids swear.
Right. Well, it is cool. Like it's the coolest thing in the world to swear. So
it's true.
But the show has gotten better, and the second season it feels less forced. Even when they do randomly swear, I'm like, okay, well, it's better than it was in the first season. But the thing I've spent the most time watching in the last couple of weeks, I've watched 5 seasons of Impractical Jokers.
Good for you, man. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's again, it's kind of like Jackass, where it's just like I kind of needed something that is just fun, and that this show is just fun. It highly recommend it if you enjoy watching nonsensical pranks and things like that. But yeah, that's what I've been watching lately. A lot of TV.
Yeah, I mean, we can't spend all your time watching movies. Sometimes you need a break. What I watched, I watched Licorice Pizza, but I mean, we talked about it last week.
Hooray.
Amazing movie. Borderline top 3 of the year for me. Josh's favorite movie of the year, I believe.
Yep.
I also watched The Power of the Dog, which we also mentioned last week, which is
good movie.
Yeah, exceptionally well directed, especially I think I think on a first watch a little slow in the first half because you don't quite know where it's going, but when you get it, it's pretty impressive. I wouldn't be mad at Jane Campion winning a director award at the Oscars.
Well, get ready to not be mad because she's going to win.
Because she's very, very much probably going to win, right? She's the front runner, I would imagine right now. Yeah.
Yes.
Then I also watched 20th Century Women, which, the reason why I watched it was because I saw that on the outline that Come On was one of Jeff's favorite movies of the year. And I was
Number 2, yeah.
Come On is not available here, so I might as well go back and see 20th Century Women, a movie that I loved. I would love to do that on the show at some point. And
as a clarification from our last episode, friend of the show, Jackson Wells, he did tell us that the interviews from Come On with the kids are legitimate interviews. They're the actual things that the kids said, which is pretty cool. Really makes that movie even better to me.
Also, I watched Batman, but the 1966 version, that I had never seen before. Which I don't know. I feel like if you don't have an idea of what the series was, just does not hold up. It's just like. It's just kind of a series of random weird gags, which in some ways was charming, but in other ways was like, this movie's pretty long. I wish it was shorter. I watched Mandy as well. Also, Nick Cage. Another weird Nick Cage movie. Insane film. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
I haven't,
one of the craziest films I've seen in a while. Extremely interesting, especially in terms of just visual art direction, just style. It's I don't know. It gets under your skin in a weird way because it's not really a horror movie. It's more of an action movie. There's a cult involved, but there's no jump scares or stuff like that. It's more kind of a disturbing feeling that it gives you just because it's so psychedelic and weird. Really great performance. Really great performance by Nick Cage. It's a movie that would not work at all if it wasn't for Nick Cage. It would completely fall apart if it wasn't for him just holding it all together. It's
so interesting that Nick Cage has such a reputation. With some people, they only think of him as a B movie actor. He's not. They think of him as a one note kind of performer. But then when you dive into his filmography, there's a lot of really good stuff, really great performances from Nick Cage.
And the thing about Mandy is that it is a B movie, but it's very much like an elevated B movie. It's going for more, at least stylistically, for more of an artistic interpretation of that classic, exploitation movie. And it really works, thanks to Nick Cage in large part. Good movie. I really suggest it. And finally, just 2 days ago, I went to the cinema to watch Nightmare Alley, the latest film by Guillermo del Toro, which I don't know. I thought it looked absolutely flawless. I think it's one of the prettiest movies of last year for sure. And I also thought,
did you see it in color or black and white?
I saw it in color, not black and white. Which sounds interesting, but I do think the colors are so good. There's some of the color contrasts that they do are so impressive that I don't know if I would prefer a black and white version. But regardless of that, incredible cinematography. Movie's really long, and it takes an hour and a half for you to understand where it's actually going.
I've heard that, yeah.
So I don't know. I thought parts of it were stunning, and I thought parts of it I was kind of checked out and didn't really care.
Right.
It's kind of a very interesting visual exercise and an interesting character sort of exploration with Bradley Cooper, who's really good in it, but it just takes a little too long to get there for me. So not one of my favorite Del Toro movies, but still pretty, I think worth watching just for the visuals alone and for the performances. And that's it. So, and then I watched Brick for the podcast, of course.
Which is what we're going to talk about now.
Which, speaking of, let's get into it. This week's film to remember, Brick, Rian Johnson's Brick from 2005. So let's do some boilerplate stuff first of all. There's quite a few interesting things about it, but I'll try to get through it as fast as I can. It was written and directed by Nerd Internet's favourite director, Rian Johnson, as they call him. No, Rian Johnson. It was his directorial debut and marked his first collaboration with cinematographer Steve Yedlin, producer Ram Bergman, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who would work on all the films that he would make after that. Gordon-Levitt has a starring role in Looper, but he has either a cameo or a voice role in all of his movies. I think he's a stormtrooper for 1 second in The Last Jedi or something like that.
Yeah.
As well as his cousin, composer Nathan Johnson, who would go on to work with other directors as well, and would work on all of the movies Johnson has made except for The Last Jedi, because
obviously the role of composer was taken.
You can't give it to somebody else. It's John Williams, obviously. The main inspiration that he cited for the movie were classic noir and detective films that he used to watch when he was younger and in film school, and also the hardboiled novels written by Dashiell Hammett specifically, who he says he discovered from this interview that the Coen brothers did about Miller's Crossing in 1990, while he was just out of high school or in high school. Another source of inspiration, which would be extremely obvious to anyone who's a fan of the show, was Twin Peaks by David Lynch. Again, I will not go on a Twin Peaks rant, but it's high school mystery, small town America. There's a blonde girl getting involved with drugs and trafficking, found dead in the water. There's a jazzy soundtrack. The visual style is very reminiscent of Twin Peaks as well. There's a character called Laura in a femme fatale type role, and there is even a scene where she sends the protagonist to a place called Coffee and Pie. So it's very plain to see, and I enjoyed noticing all these details, especially on a second watch. I sort of tuned into that stuff.
Which is exactly why, before the show started, Hugo said, I like this movie. And I said,
yeah,
you would like this movie. Because it's very obvious ties to David Lynch.
It doesn't take the surrealism of Twin Peaks, but I think some of the visual style and a lot of little things.
There's one scene in particular.
Are quite reminiscent. Yeah.
One scene in particular we'll talk about later, but that just jumped out to me and I was like, oh, okay. This is straight out of the David Lynch playbook.
Well, you guys are both talking about it like it's obvious. It wasn't obvious to me, so I'm glad Hugo mentioned that stuff, because I didn't notice any of that, honestly.
Maybe it's a rewatch thing, you know? I don't know.
Well, I saw this years ago. I mean, this is technically my second watch, but yeah.
Yeah. He said it himself in interviews, but yesterday night, because the first time I watched it, I didn't notice it either. But yesterday night, while I was watching it, I was like, I recognize this. There's something here. And then, if you go do research, and by research, I mean just go to Wikipedia of the movie, he said himself that Twin Peaks was one of the inspiration.
Yeah, makes sense.
So the idea behind the movie was basically to combine classic noir cinema tropes to a high school mystery, so put it in an unusual setting. This is interesting to me just because kind of Rian Johnson, that's kind of what he does in his career. He likes to operate within a genre, but to kind of deconstruct the rules of that genre, or at least not necessarily subvert them, as the internet likes to say, but certainly explore them in a way that's kind of self-aware. He wrote the first draft of the script in 1997 and spent years trying to find funding for it, but with studios basically saying that the material was too unusual, which is why he couldn't really get it made initially. Which I find that interesting, because I don't know, I feel like this movie is not that weird or unusual. Maybe for a first-time director,
I think
he couldn't get it made.
It's very unusual within the high school story genre.
Right. Okay.
Because
I could see that.
If you're looking at who's the target market for this movie, is basically the question that the production companies are going to look at. Right. Yeah. And there's not a huge market there.
That's true. No, I understand. He eventually kind of made a calculation, as he said, of the minimum amount of money he could possibly make the film with. And he received part of the funding initially by his parents, who had a construction company. And they started basically the funding, and then having already a base of funding, he found other sources of money to produce the film. And the movie went into production in 2003, and it was only made with less than $500,000. Sorry, less than $500,000, $450,000, which, for a zero budget movie seems like a lot, but it really is nothing. I really can't think of any movies that have any recognition that are that cheap, except for maybe Christopher Nolan's following, and I don't know.
There's a few.
Clerks.
Clerks is definitely one.
Yeah. There's some movies in the 90s.
Primer. Primer is probably the quintessential example.
Primer's probably, yeah.
That was made for like $7,000, which is absurd. And then Paranormal Activity was made for less than $1 million. For sure.
Yeah. But,
but that also looks like it was made for less than $1 million.
It does make me wonder how much of the budget went to the cast. Because Joseph Gordon-Levitt was not a nobody. Like, he wasn't a superstar to that degree.
I feel like he wasn't... He was still in the early stages of his career, and he also kind of developed this interesting relationship with Johnson, where he liked him and he liked the character, and there's a reason why he worked with him for the rest of his career. So I don't know.
I doubt the cast got much money. If you're making a movie, if you're making this kind of movie that shoots for 20 days and you're only making it for $450,000, there's no money in that budget to pay the cast. Like I imagine a lot of that's going to film stock because this is shot on film and that was expensive back in the day. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know how he made this for $4.5 million. Like you watch this and like
not $4.5 million.
Granted,
450,000.
It doesn't look awesome, but like this kind of story with this kind of scope and scale, you would think would be 10 times that budget. $4.5 million or so, like easy. So yeah, I don't know. You can see some of the corners he cut, I think, but it's still really impressive.
I feel like it's the kind of movie that today might get, I don't know, a next Netflix release and could get like a 10 million budget or something like that. So
it is one of the things I like about Joseph Gordon-Levitt is that I kind of feel like he picks movies because he actually wants to make them these days, and even back then. So I could see that maybe he's willing to not take a huge pay on this movie because he thought it was interesting. But because at this point, he was a child actor for like.
Was he in Third Rock from the Sun yet?
Yeah, he had already done Third Rock from the Sun. He had already done Angels in the Outfield.
Yep.
So he
was in 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah, and he'd already done 10 Things I Hate About You, and was the voice of the main character in Treasure Planet, the Disney movie. Yeah, so like, that's right. The dude had a pretty successful career going.
Yeah. So anyway, the film premiered at the 2005 Sundance Film Festival, where it won a special jury prize for originality of vision, which I thought was interesting. And it then released in cinemas in 2006, and in total it made 3.9 million worldwide, which considering the budget is a pretty good gross. And I don't imagine this would have had like a big marketing budget or anything. Like, it's one of those films.
I imagine they had almost no marketing budget.
Yeah, it probably got picked up at Sundance and was distributed a year later by a studio, which is usually
by Focus Features.
Focus, yeah,
as we know.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, let's see. Well, if it played Sundance in January of 2005,
I think it released around April 2006, but initially it was only
so
in
they
two
sat
theaters.
on it for. They sat on it for 14 months,
Yeah.
So is this the time where I talk about box office?
It is.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. This is Josh's box office breakdown.
Welcome to Josh's box office breakdown. Yeah, I thought this came out in 05, but you're right. It came out in 06, so they bought it at Sundance in January of 05 and didn't put it out until March of 06, but they put it out on 2 screens, March 31st, 06, and it made $83,000, which is, whatever, on 2 screens.
I mean, it's not bad as a per theater average, though.
No, that's actually really good as a per theater average.
Yeah.
We've actually already talked about what the box office looked like on March 31st, 2006, because that was the weekend that Slither was released. So we've already talked about how number 1 was Ice Age: The Meltdown, and number 2 was Inside Man, etc. So
did it go much wider afterwards?
Brick went as wide as it was never wider than 45 screens, and that was in its 3rd and 4th weeks of release. And it made.
I'd be curious where those screens were. Like, were they all in Los Angeles and New York?
Probably L.A., New York, and
maybe Chicago,
other parts of Southern California, Chicago, Boston. But its 3rd weekend was when it made $233,000, which is the most it made in a given weekend. It was number 22 at the box office, which was as high as it got in the box office list. And that weekend, in its third week, number 1 at the box office was Scary Movie 4. Good movie. Number 2 was Ice Age: The Meltdown, as we mentioned. Number 3 was the movie Benchwarmers, which was that like brief second when John Hader was almost a movie star. Yeah. And a movie called The Wilds, which I don't even know what that is.
Billy Bob Thornton's Bad News Bears. That's my bad.
Oh, The Wilds, apparently an adolescent lion and accidentally shipped from the New York Zoo to Africa. That sounds a lot like Madagascar.
Oops.
But sounds an awful like Madagascar. But apparently that's opening to number 4 for $9.5 million. And then there's a number of movies that I've never heard of from 2006. I guess it wasn't tuned into the box office very much. But yeah, Brick ended its domestic run with $2 million gross, $3.9 million worldwide. I mean, it's a great,
not bad on the investment.
ROI for know.
I'm sure Rian Johnson's parents were really happy about that after putting up the money.
Yeah, and I'm sure Rian Johnson was himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It kind of launched his career. Like
not kind of. It absolutely did.
Yeah. His follow-up wasn't as successful, I think, critically.
No.
Not a lot of people have seen it. Brothers Bloom, I don't know if you guys have seen it.
I have not seen it.
I saw it earlier last year, and I think it's fine. Like, it's not a great film. It's kind of, it feels like he's almost trying to find his voice still, and it almost feels like he kind of did a Wes Anderson movie. If you watch that movie, it kind of feels like he's trying to do a Wes Anderson movie for some reason. And then after that, he would obviously make Looper, which did really well, and it was critically well received. The Last Jedi, the discourse, we don't need to get into that. And Knives Out, and he just got got that crazy deal with Netflix where for 2 movies they gave him $469 million to produce them and all that stuff and market them.
I mean, after The Last Jedi, which despite the naysayers was an extremely successful movie by almost any metric, and Knives Out, which was also an extremely successful movie by any metric, like, makes sense. Mm-hmm. He's gonna get paid by the people who got more money they can spend.
Yeah, way more. But anyway, speaking of Brick, the premise of the movie is that Brendan, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, is a high school student who receives a note from Emily, who is his ex-girlfriend, who he hasn't seen in a while, asking him for help. When he goes to the phone booth where she sends him, she asks him for his help, but immediately disappeared after she is scared by something, which is a car passing by, and we don't understand exactly what's happening. Brendan, who is kind of somewhat of this high school hard-boiled detective, spends the rest of the film investigating first her disappearance and then her death. In doing so, he interacts with different people and covers the underground drug ring operated by The Pin, who's the quirkiest character I've ever seen on screen in my life, and centered around this mysterious...
That's not true. There's no way that's true.
It's a joke. And this mysterious titular brick that we don't understand until like a good hour something into the movie what exactly the brick is. So that's the premise. And just to start us off, we talked a little bit about Rian Johnson, but what are our just general overall thoughts on the film? And I think I want to frame this specifically as, is this movie good? Like just blanket statement good, or does the context of how cheaply it was made and being a directorial debut and it was also the first movie he wrote, like, does that context kind of give it a push in how well regarded it is, you guys think? Or
I do think that it helps. I think there's stuff to recommend about this outside of that context, but for me, I think a lot of the appeal is that aspect. But at the same time, like, I remember talking about this with a friend of mine several years ago, and like, she didn't know it was made for super cheap, and I was like, really? You couldn't tell? She's like, no, I couldn't. I'm like, okay, well, I guess you enjoyed it irrespective of its, budget constraints and everything. And so, but I mean, for me, we can get more into it, but that's part of the charm for me, is knowing it's a first-time director. So
for me, the question, is it good? Yeah, it's good. There are some obvious weak spots in the film, which we'll dive into more as we go on. So it's safe for me to say it's good, but I don't think I would say it's great. I would say there are things about it that are great, but then the things that are to its detriment are pretty significant in my opinion. But it in terms of the uniqueness of this story, it's one of a kind. So yeah, it has some really great value just in that. So if you're a fan of noir, if you're a fan of high school dramas, if you're just into quirky, weird movies, this is a really good pick because it excels in those aspects.
Yeah, so for me, I frame that question that way because I can't... I really like this, and I'm not sure within myself, if I like it because I understand that context and I'm kind of charmed by the fact that they were even able to pull this off, or if I just think it's really good. But because I think I can see where some weak spots are, but overall I think the mood that it creates and some of the quirky writing and acting, I think is really interesting. I don't know. I like the setting. There's a lot to love here, for me at least. In terms of filmmaking, I agree that the film does look cheap because it is cheap, but there's something, as you said, there's something appealing about that. The fact that it kind of feels like it's very analog in the way that it's done. It looks like there's people who really care about this, who did the best that they could.
Yeah, it looks like a labor of love.
Yeah, and it gets me in that way.
Well, also, like, as you said in the boilerplate section, like Rian Johnson calculated carefully the least amount of money he could make this for, and you only do that by storyboarding. Yeah. So there's like every shot in this clearly was well thought out and planned ahead of time, because that's how you do a budget breakdown, is figure out like exactly what shots. Like that way you can go to financiers and be like, I need to get these 500 shots, and here are all 500 shots I'm going to get, and it'll cost me. We can do this shot in 5 hours, so it'll cost us, this much money. We can do this shot in this many hours, it'll cost us this much money. So like, it has to be like that in order to make a movie like this. But you can see that on screen, the planning and the care and the precision, which again I admire a lot.
It also, I don't know if maybe it's the quality of the film that was used, or it almost has like a homemade quality to it. Mm-hmm. That I think adds a little to the charm. It's like, it's, I don't want to say it's like a high school film, but it kind of like something that you'd make in a high school film class. But it has some of those characteristics that I remember from like, films that friends of mine made for fun, in high school and stuff.
It kind of does feel like the best student film.
Yeah.
Like, it has that sense to it. But I like that about it. So I also think the writing there's something about the way Rian Johnson writes dialogue that I always find really interesting, because his characters his writing is very wordy. There's a lot of complicated sentences. There's people talking over each other, people speaking quite fast, using slang that I'm not even entirely sure whether it exists or not. Like, they use some words in this movie where I'm like, did they kind of just make it up for this movie, or is that how they talked in the city, in the small town in California where it was made? Like, I'm not entirely even sure.
It's noir stuff. It's pulling from those movies.
It's Dashiell Hammett.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, I learned something.
Wait, time out. I need to understand this to move forward in this conversation. You thought that people in San Clemente, California, might have actually talked like Dashiell Hammett characters?
No. But like there's certain. Yeah, there's certain slang words that I had no idea what they were. Like, I understood it in context, but I didn't realize it was from Dashiell Hammett. That's well, awesome.
It's possible some of the slang might be words that Rian Johnson came up with slang for that fit the style of Dashiell Hammett.
Right. Yeah.
So like, because I don't know if like obviously there are some devices that are used in that era that weren't going to be around in the. I
don't know if Dashiell Hammett was writing about heroin very much.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, it wasn't, so like they probably have some slang for stuff like that they come up with a term for it that fits that sort of narrative world, and so that sort of stuff I think is Rian Johnson coming up with some new slang that fits. But the fact that we can't really tell for sure what was a fabrication and what was pulled from the style that he was going for is an indicator that this is very well written. But
I like the dialogue because there are lots of times where I don't understand every word. I don't know what every word means, but I understand perfectly what they are saying, and I think that's really good writing. There's this quote that stuck with me when I was watching. It's like he's got Brain, who's his partner, asks him whether they should call the police, and he goes, "No, bulls would gum it. They flash their dusty standards at the wide-eyed and probably find some yegg to pin, probably even the right one. But they trample the real tracks and scare the real players back into their holes. And if we're doing this, I want the whole story. No cops, not for a bit." That's just like, that's not how high school students talk.
No.
But in the setting of this movie, it feels, within that world, it feels authentic, which I really enjoy. I think it's kind of, I think it's good world building, because everyone talks like that in this movie for some reason, and it kind of works. But anyway, let's get into the actual story of the movie. So the opening scene of the film, we see Brendan, who is staring at this dead blonde girl, who we'll later find out is Emily, who's the girl who disappears. She's lying face down in a little stream of water, and we focus on this peculiar, like, blue bracelet she's wearing, which I think is a really good imagery, a striking image. At this point, we don't know it's Emily yet, and the film sort of has this scene. We see him being very distraught about it, but we don't really know that they had a relationship, and the film then cuts back and does, 2 days earlier, and then the next half hour of the movie is us catching back up to that moment at the opening. So I don't know, I think it's a really good opening scene. I like the structural idea of opening that way. It's kind of very film noirish, very detective story-ish. It's also something that Rian Johnson does. Like he likes to use flashbacks in his movies in interesting ways that inform the story. I think he always does it quite well. Also, the tunnel where we find the corpse, and when we have a confrontation later in the movie, it's inspired by Memories of Murder, right? Like, Memories of Murder came out in 2003, and Johnson would have seen it when they were making the movie. I'm not sure, but it looks so similar.
It does look very similar, and that occurred to me that while I was watching it, it's like, I mean, it is also just a very good shot, and so if you're if you're
maybe
a film
they just
buff,
had the
maybe
same
you
idea at
have
the same
kind of the
time.
same idea. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe
well,
Josh.
once we don't get the reverse shot from inside the tunnel until like an hour
later.
into the movie, if not more.
Yeah.
And like the reverse shot's the one that really looks like Memories of Murder. And I don't remember for sure, but I feel like at some point I've heard him say in an interview that he was inspired by it, just because like I saw this years ago and saw Memories of Murder for the podcast, a month or so ago. And I remember thinking, oh, that's where Rian Johnson got that. Like,
yeah. It could
to me, it's like obvious. Like I don't know how he would have done that shot and not Memories of Murder, but I don't know. Maybe it's a coincidence, but I feel like he had to have.
I mean, there is a certain. It was obvious.
There's a certain part of it that is kind of like a noir staple, where like a lot of like old detective shows and stuff open with the detective, looking over the corpse in like in a riverbed, in I mean, all sorts of stuff. So this does kind of fits. Like, I could see how if he didn't get it directly from Memories of a Murder, then I could see how. But also,
but you get that I'm talking about the execution scene, right?
I know exactly
like
what
that
you're talking
specific shot. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is
the
later.
Execution scene is uncanny. It's exactly the same. But I agree, Jeff. Like even just the idea of a silhouette against the tunnel is the most famous image of The Third Man, for example, which is a famous noir film, which Johnson would have been familiar with.
But real quick, Hugo, before we move on from the opening, I do like that it opens here, then we flash back, but we get back to this point within like 20 minutes, I think.
Yeah,
like
it doesn't take
long.
long.
It's not. Yeah, like I feel like the temptation in a lot of movies like this, a lot of movies that like open in media res then flash back, they're usually opening on like the most dramatic moment. It's like end of Act 2 stuff, or like even Act 3 stuff, and it takes forever to get back to that moment. It's, I don't know, that this works better than that. I think the fact that we get back to this moment within 20 minutes.
And I wanted to say on this opening shot, because normally Josh really has a lot to say about opening shots, but on this one, for me, it kind of hit home that this was a really excellent opening shot, because all that was in my head, I could hear a classic noir detective doing a narration like they do in the old shows and stuff. Oh, the poor dame never saw it coming. I could hear that even though that's not being said, because something about the way the shot is framed just kind of, it really brings that to my mind. So I think it's an excellent way to start.
The mood, I think.
I mean, I think it's because that we see, I mean, I don't remember specifically, but I think we see the body and then we see him looking at the body.
Yeah.
So, like, it's framed as, like, us watching someone discover the body. Yeah. So, like, the fact that you hear that narration in your head, I think makes sense. And he's basically doing that visually by focusing on his reaction to finding the body.
Very well executed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we all agree. Great opening to the film. How do we feel, speaking of how it's very much noir inspired, how we feel about the execution of this idea of the noir set in a high school mystery? I think the overall tone of the movie is pretty good. Like it does have that mood, that noirish mood that kind of contrasts with the high school setting. But I found it interesting. And so I think some elements that we have is like we have Brendan, who's this kind of jaded, hard-boiled detective. He doesn't trust anyone but himself. He's kind of has problems with authority, which is kind of a staple of that genre. And I really like the relationship that he has as this sort of private investigator who works for the school and the VP, who is kind of represents the police, like they're the institution and he's operating outside of the institutional police force. I find that the fact that the way it's reframed as a high school relationship is really cool. And one of my favorite scenes is when he has that meeting with the VP. And the VP, they kind of go back and forth. And you have to lay off me for a couple of days because I'm trying to solve this thing. We can't have the cops around and stuff. So how do you guys feel about all that stuff? Because I thought it was really cool.
Grizz?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think it's one of the things, like I said at the beginning, that makes this movie so unique. Now, is it a perfect fit? I don't know. It's kind of like when you see modern takes on Shakespeare, like this. I haven't seen Tragedy of Macbeth yet, so I don't know if that applies to that necessarily. But I forget which one. I think Kenneth Branagh did one a few years ago, where it was like the modern world, but they all spoke with the actual Shakespearean writing.
Well, Romeo plus Juliet was that, the Baz Luhrmann.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking. Well, that one for sure as well. But in any case, when you see those sort of takes, there is something that is very interesting about the way the people are talking and knowing that it doesn't fit the world that they're living in. And so I find that very fascinating. But at the same time, it is also, it kind of takes you out of the world in some way because you know that that's not how people talk. So for me, there's a little bit of a juxtaposition there.
It's a bit of both.
Yeah, so there's reasons I love it, and there's also reasons that it distracts me from what's actually happening in the movie. But as far as like the idea, I think it's a really bold and inventive take on the noir genre, and so that is to be applauded. What do you think, Josh?
I think you and I feel similarly about the movie, just based on what you're talking about right now, and based on the Letterboxd review that I read from you. In that, like, I think I enjoyed it as well, but I think it is a little bit tiresome. I think that I like I feel like I should like this more than I actually do, because like I do like detective stories, I do like noir, but to Grizz's point, like I think it's like a fun exercise. And a fun exercise in genre and a fun exercise in style, but acknowledging that doesn't make it any more engaging, I guess. Like it kind of keeps you at arm's length. Again, to take Grizz's point, like it's a little bit alienating the way they talk sometimes, and like honestly, this is hard for me to follow. Like it's overly complicated by design, because detective stories like this are intentionally overly complicated, but the overcomplicated aspects of the plot, in addition to like kind of only half understanding sometimes when they talk as fast as they do, use slang that I don't understand, like it's tough to follow. And in fact, like I've seen this before. I saw it years ago, and then in preparation for this podcast, before I watched it, I read the Wikipedia plot summary because I remember it being complicated. And even having read that and having seen it before, watching it this week, I'm like, I'm kind of lost still. And like, you know, so this is Roger Ebert wrote a negative review of The Usual Suspects, and like I don't feel negative about this, but I will pull from his negative review of The Usual Suspects to give this about Brick, in that he said about Usual Suspects, to the degree that I do understand, I don't care. which is kind of scathing, but also like kind of true. Again, like I enjoy this more than he enjoyed Usual Suspects, but like to the degree that I get what's happening, I kind of don't care what's happening, which I guess isn't great, but I mean, I still enjoy it, you know.
It's
more on that later.
Yeah, it's kind of like a movie that you like because you like movies and you like how movies are made and you like, you know, looking at the process. And this film kind of shows the process. Like you can see what their thinking was the whole way through.
I love directorial debuts. I think I've probably talked about that. The Coen Brothers' Blood Simple is another one they made for, not unlike this, they made it for super, super cheap. Did it within a genre because they thought they could kind of get away with a lower budget doing that. And they also like overly prepared, you know, storyboarded just so they could make it for cheaper. And they also got like small time individual investors as opposed to like traditional Hollywood funding. Like Coen Brothers literally went door to door in Minneapolis and just like pulled the projector into people's homes and like showed them the trailer to try to like get them to write them a check. And they say that Blood Simple was funded mostly by Jewish dentists in Minneapolis was how they made Blood Simple. So like that kind of stuff, you know, that has this has that same kind of charm, I think. But like what I was thinking about this morning is one of my favorite shows is Community. Have you guys seen much Community?
I've seen all of it.
I have not, but yeah.
So they do they do genre spoof episodes. They did an episode that was a Ken Burns documentary. They did an episode that was an Law and Order SVU. They did a David Fincher episode. And like this feels like that, except it's first of all feature length and completely straight faced, which I think is maybe which maybe my issue with it. I wish it was more playful. Like I like the one playful scene is probably my favorite scene in the movie is when the Pin's mom is offering Brendan drinks when he comes over, asking, you know, if he wants milk. Oh, we're having another cornflakes or apple juice or orange juice, and that's like acknowledging the ridiculousness of this tone and this setting, and it's like one of the only times that it does that, and I kind of wanted more of that from it because it's so self-serious.
And it's interesting that you would say that because I think that's very much what Rian Johnson does in the more successful movies that he made. Like both
Knives Out is so playful.
Yeah,
it's
Luke of the Last Jedi and Knives Out are all very playful with the tropes of their own genre, which I think this movie tries to do, but I think because they want to maintain that very noirish tone, they don't quite go through with it. And I kind of agree that it could have done with some elements of levity in that way. But that scene with the pin is funny. It's great because he's just some guy who's in over his head. Like I like that the movie. There's that sentence where they talk about him. Oh, local legend, the pin, supposed to be old, like 26, lives in town. Like he's just some dude at 26 who doesn't know what to do, so he gets in over his head with this drug thing. There is that element, but it doesn't go as far as it could. I agree. Okay, so we talked a bit about the premise and the noir. Let's get more into like the actual narrative of the film, because I think it's a very narrative-focused film. Speaking of what you said before, Josh, I think it's a movie that benefits from being watched with subtitles, which I think maybe a detriment.
I wouldn't be able to watch this without subtitles.
Yeah, it's kind of maybe a detriment to the writing, but I think because I'm so used to listening with subtitles, because English is still a second language after all, I don't know. Maybe I wasn't as affected by not understanding the dialogue all the time. I don't know. But anyway, getting into the story. So I wanted to just go through like the interesting characters that he meets. Of course, there's Brain, who's this basically Brandon's guy in the chair. We don't get much from him, but he's really this really intelligent guy who kind of helps him out. And it's kind of the only one who he actually trusts of the whole group.
Brain is his gal Friday, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, he's not around for much, but I think they have a few exchanges that I really like. There's that scene where they're talking about, Emily said these 4 words that I didn't understand, like tug, the pin, the brick, and I did like that exchange. It was a cool moment for me. Then we have the subplot with Dode and Kara. Dode is this kind of junkie who he basically beats up because he wants to get a lead on where Emily, who's disappeared, has gone. And then Dode ends up playing a more central role later in the movie, which we'll talk about when we get to the ending. I do think maybe the film has one too many subplots as well. There's that part with the football player. They have a fight. I mean, it's a fun scene, but like they have a fight with him, and then the football player hires an assassin to kill him with a knife, and who runs after him.
Is that what's going on there?
Yeah, they say at the end, oh yeah, that guy was just some guy who the football player hired to stab you. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't...
Yeah, so that's one of those moments where I think that the blending of the genres didn't work.
There was no need for that. Because you're right, because a lot of noir movies have kind of how do you say it? Like a subplot that doesn't actually go anywhere, just to deviate you from the main plot, and because the detective thinks this is relevant, but it ends up just being coincidental. But within this story, it just feels completely out of place. It's just like this high school kid hired a killer. That seems a bit much.
Well, he did, embarrass him in a fight in a parking lot in front of the mall.
Yeah,
so.
Come on. It's a bit much. Other characters that are interesting, we have Emily, obviously, who's the former girlfriend who we... sorry, go ahead, Grizz.
Well, it's just you had also mentioned Kara.
Yeah.
That, everything that takes place with the theater kids is among the weirder parts of the movie. And I just wanted to ask, what's the deal with, like, is she using a guy as a footstool? There's always a guy popping up.
I wasn't sure what to make of that either.
That to me is... like a David Lynch scene where there's one random character that doesn't have anything to do with the narrative, but he's kind of there and he's weird. And I'm pretty sure there's no reason
within the reality of this story, what's actually happening? Like I wasn't sure. Like they're not doing an oral sex joke, are they?
Well, that's what I thought, Josh. I thought maybe that's what they were doing, and I was like, that felt really out of place.
I'm not sure.
So then I thought, okay, well maybe it's not that. Maybe it's that she controls people. So she's like, this guy is literally a lapdog. And so that's why I thought maybe she's using him as like a footstool or something. She's kicking her feet up on this guy. I don't know. But it was very odd. And that was as one of those moments that I'm like, okay, what's happening here?
Yeah. By the end, I think we see Kara kind of manipulated Dode into trying to swindle some money from the pin. And I think that's kind of her role. But it's kind of another way the film is kind of misdirecting your attention in some ways, which... is cool, but I think it does it one too many times overall. Then we have Emily and Laura. Laura is this other very ambiguous figure who she kind of helps Brandon in his investigation. She points him in the right direction a few times, and she kind of becomes this weird romantic interest. But also, we never exactly know whose side she's on until the end. I don't know. How do you guys feel about her? I really liked her character because I think she played the I'm in over my head. I understand what the problem is. I'm trying to kind of get out of the situation and fix it very well until it's revealed that she was actually kind of orchestrating stuff behind the scenes. I liked her performance quite a lot.
I like the performance, but I also think that this is not a good example of breaking tropes, but rather this is like very, very much classically a trope where the girl that's been helping the detective,
the Spider Woman,
was actually behind it all along. So that's so this is not considering how much Rian Johnson tries to not subvert's not necessarily the right word, but like play with the tropes in the genres that he's playing around in. This one is just straight up the trope. But within that, it is an excellent performance, and she's the through line, essentially, of the movie. Is everything that's happening with her character. So, I think it's good, but not particularly inventive. What did you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are using terms like playing with tropes. I'm not really sure he's playing with many tropes here. I think that the only playful aspect is the fact that it's set in a high school, and that these people don't usually talk like this. But other than that, like, it's a very, very straightforward.
I suppose you're right.
Dashiell Hammett-esque, like, I mean, maybe there's something that I'm not thinking of. But
I kind of agree. It's the setting and the ages and the fact that the pin is operating out of his mum's basement. That's the subversion. It's kind of played so straight that it really kind of is just redoing the tropes in a different setting, which is inventive, but
maybe that's an issue with the way I was coming at the movie, is that because it's a noir film set in a high school and they talk like they're in the noir film, maybe I was expecting more playing around with tropes because of that setup. But in reality, it's like you said, it's actually a very straightforward noir film shot at your local high school and mall.
Yeah.
Yep. San Clemente High. Which Rian Johnson actually did go to the high school where they filmed this, by the way, in case we didn't say that already.
Yeah.
I mean, I like her performance. I like her performance too, but like we said, she's just the Spider-Woman character she basically kind of gives him rides the whole movie. Like she doesn't even strike me as that ambiguous. She's kind of like always there and like is a shoulder for him to land on, and until
it's revealed that
so she's leading him where she wants him to be. So like that in that way, she is still the Spider-Woman.
She's kind of using everyone just so she can get away with it, but then he figures it out and she doesn't get away with it, which is very much classic film noir stuff. I agree,
but she's I guess so. Real quick, to kind of allude what I said earlier is that I feel like I don't have some of the fun of mystery stories is like you have a chance to figure it out before the characters do, and I feel like that's not really the case here. Like, I'm kind of just being yanked along in different directions. And, like, is there, minus him noticing her cigarette, which is 10 minutes before the ultimate reveal, like, is there any way to put this together on your own? Or, I feel like we as audiences aren't privy to enough information to be able to put this together. So, you're kind of just along for the ride, which makes it less engaging, I think.
I agree.
That's an interesting question, because I did not think about it in those terms, and I kind of agree. Like, it's not when he confronts her at the end in the field, and he's like, "I know exactly everything that happened." I'm sitting there thinking, "Please tell me, because I have no idea."
How do you know that?
Yeah, which is a fun breakdown at that point, but I agree that you're kind of just along, and I guess I tuned into the mood of the film so much that I didn't notice that I wasn't actually engaging with it as a mystery,
which is cool in its own right.
Yeah, which is fine. A
different. It's a different way of
different approach. Yeah,
engaging with the movie.
Which, funnily enough, is the opposite of what he does in Knives Out. I keep bringing up Knives Out because I think it's an interesting foil to this movie, because Knives Out basically gives you the story,
everything you need,
very much at the beginning.
Yes,
and then it twists around that story. But you're kind of
what a great movie, man!
Great movie. Yeah, you kind of know the basics of what happened right at the beginning, and then it kind of slowly unfolds and adds detail to that.
But I guess in Rian Johnson's defense, like, I mean, I haven't read any Dashiell Hammett, but I have read some, Raymond Chandler and some Mickey Spillane, and like guys who are like Dashiell Hammett at least, and like, I kind of see how those books lend themselves to this kind of style, as opposed to a Knives Out, which is an Agatha Christie riff, as opposed to a Dashiell Hammett riff, and like those are two different things. Agatha Christie really does kind of like give you all the pieces you can ultimately figure it out, but this is a little different. Like those books are a little different, so maybe I just prefer one over the other.
Yeah, noir. I actually did it was like social, what was it? It was like cultural sociology class that I did for my bachelor degree, where we did talk about noir as a genre. And it is true that noir is really, it's kind of using the mystery to make more of a larger commentary about, it's more of a social commentary on everything's wrong, the
people are selfish,
people are selfish, you can't trust anyone, the institutions that are supposed to protect us are corrupt. That's kind of the commentary that noir as a genre as a whole goes for. But
and the nature of the private eye too, that you can't really trust the cops.
Exactly.
You have to go to someone.
Yeah. So I guess in that genre specifically, the mystery isn't as. I mean, it's kind of incidental to what the movie is trying to say. The stories are trying to say. But I do agree that in this, because of the setting, you don't feel that larger social commentary that noir as a genre usually has. So you kind of tune into the mystery more. But by doing the tropes of the noir, you can't really follow the mystery or figure it out by yourself. So it's kind of in this weird middle ground position, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just like part of why I kind of hold the movie at arm's length, and that it's kind of holding us at arm's length. I think,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I think that's fair. Other story elements of character, we have the Pin and the Tug. The Pin is this older guy, 26, which is my age, I guess they call him old now. Who runs?
You're not selling drugs to high schoolers, Hugo. Otherwise, you'd also be an old guy if you did that.
Am I? What? Sorry.
No, he's not. No, he's not.
I'm not.
Why do you think he's in England?
Why do you think I'm in England? Yeah, I had to escape.
He got chased out of Italy.
He's not the Pin. He's the mule.
Yeah, that's me. God. Okay, so the Pin is this weird character who wears a cape and lives in a weird lives in his mother's house, but it has this weird basement that's very, very David Lynch.
I was gonna say this is one of two scenes where I'm like, this is David Lynch.
This is extreme. Yeah, it's an extremely David Lynch scene. I just think the Pin's basement is just a cool design, and you know, it's obvious. It's very, very obvious David Lynch callback, but I like it. I think it kind of works, and I also like his weird from the outside it looks like just a truck, and then inside it has like these velvet seats, and and there's a lamp in it, and it looks like an old timey carriage.
His van thing. Yeah,
and he has a cane. I don't know. I just think a lot of Rian Johnson movies have these elements that feel kind of from another time, and don't completely fit in the actual time where the movies are set. And I don't know, I kind of enjoy that stuff.
And not for nothing, but that's another thing that happens a lot in noir, is they have characters that have really distinctive physical features that become central characters for the detective to locate, or like, I have to find the like in this case, I have to find the man with the, one leg longer than the other,
And all the characters kind of have that. They kind of have a uniform, even though it's not a uniform. Like even Brendan is always wearing kind of the same outfit, he's leaning in the same way as if it was a trench coat from, a noir detective. He has the glasses that are pretty distinct. The hair, the way he wears it is pretty distinct. Like they're kind of going for that.
He looks like Rian Johnson.
He kind
of, or what I assume Rian Johnson looked like when he was in high school. Does. Like I just kind of always assumed that they were dressing Joseph Gordon-Levitt to be a Rian Johnson.
Does, yeah. I could see that. But yeah.
Well, real quick about about the Pin's basement. Like you guys call it a Lynch homage, and maybe it is. I mean, I didn't see on the Wikipedia page that he cites Twin Peaks as a inspiration, which makes sense. But like, I also thought it was more just like we don't have any money for production design, so let's just have this this pared down room with nothing on the walls, but also like a random eagle statue, just to like give it some amount of character.
Right. Well, so that's what made me think it was Lynchian, because it is very common in a lot of stuff. Like in Twin Peaks, a lot of times you see the exterior of a building, it looks very normal, and then as soon as you walk in, it's weird as hell, and that's what this basement is.
Well, I mean, also like I'm picturing, I'm comparing and contrasting in my head the Pin's basement to Brendan's room that we see him sleeping in, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. Like that's also very pared down to the point that we really only ever see his alarm clock and nothing else, basically. Like the camera's always, the room's mostly out of focus. So like, again, talking about planning out shots and trying to make your budget go as long as you can, like to only show us a very small portion of the room gives you, leaves it up to the imagination, I guess. And, they can't really get away with doing that in the Pin's basement because they do sweep the camera around to show you the whole room. But I think what they're doing is they're taking their budget limitations and making it into like a cool character choice. To the point that you guys responded was like, oh, it's David Lynchian. Like, oh, this guy's so weird. And like I like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
It's smart. It's smart filmmaking. It's intelligent, and I think it's something that he, as a style, brings forward in his film. Like his films are very, I think, methodically planned and thought out. And apparently, like even on Star Wars, he was the one director in the Disney era of Star Wars where everything was on time, everything was completely on budget, all the production went completely smoothly, the sets were always done on time. Like all the other movies had some production issues because it's giant $200 million movies, and his one was like flawlessly produced, which I think it kind of comes from this in a way.
Yeah, 2 things. Number one, we kind of mentioned that the cinematography and how it's very well thought out and well planned. Steve Yedlin, like you said, was like, I think at USC Film School with Rian Johnson. That's how they met, and he has been the cinematographer on all of his movies, including The Last Jedi. But what's interesting is I didn't think of this until we were talking about it, but there is a lot of there's a lot of shots in this that are background foreground, where like you'll see something long in the background, and then like Brendan's feet will appear in the foreground of the frame, or something like that. There's a lot of feet in the foreground with something else happening in the background. Like that happens at least 5 or 6 times. And that makes me think of my absolute favorite shot in Star Wars, which is in the throne room in The Last Jedi, when, spoilers, a character gets cut in half, and then the lightsaber gets cut in half in the background, and then the lightsaber moves way towards the camera quickly, and then a hand comes up in the foreground and catches it. And it's having the focus on something in the background, and then something enters the frame into the foreground. That's something that happens a lot in Brick, and happens in my favorite child, Star Wars, and that thing. Number 2, though, the other thing I wanted to say is, because we're talking about the pin, do you guys recognize the actor playing the pin?
I didn't. I mean, I've seen him before, but I don't really know where.
3 things. I'll name 3 things he's in. Number 1, he's... if you've seen the music video for Welcome to the Black Parade by My Chemical Romance, he is the patient in Welcome to the Black Parade, which I thought was funny. 2, he was in the opening scene of Inception. He's like the guy who has to knock Leo DiCaprio into the tub. Yeah, he does the kick, and then he kind of disappears from the movie after that because he gets captured by Sato's guys. Number 3, though, first of all, his name's Lucas Haas. That's who it is. He's maybe most popular for his extracurricular activities, being a part of Leo DiCaprio's posse. The name I will not say because this is a family podcast, but he and Leo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire were in the We Like to Sleep with Women posse is what I'll use the euphemism and call it that. Which is surprising. Like, Leo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire, like, they seem like pretty nice, traditionally handsome guys. Yeah. Lucas Haas, kind of a weird looking dude, you know?
He was also in The Revenant.
With Leo DiCaprio, I guess you get,
Yes.
Yeah. It is what it is. But cool character, I think. Just a weird character that I enjoy the weirdness of, I guess.
Can we talk about Tug?
Can we talk about Tug? Sure, absolutely. What thoughts do you have about Tug?
This is like the least physically threatening muscle man I've ever seen in a movie. Am I wrong?
Yeah, but he wears a tank top. He wears a tank top and a beanie, so he's scary.
And he looks mean, so yeah, what more do you need to know?
No. He doesn't even, he looks like a guy who's trying to look mean.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah, but he holds blades of grass and tears them in half menacingly.
Yeah. All of that stuff really took me out of the movie. Every there's a couple of moments where I think he does pretty well, but then a lot of it's like in particular, this is one of the scenes that I thought was very Lynchian. Was when they're out in front of the mall and the car, he's leaning against Tug's car. Yeah. Well, and then Tug comes walking out, and it cuts to Brendan, and then it cuts back to Tug as he's continuing to walk. His fists clenched, and he's looking angry, and why is this guy so angry? All that has very big Twin Peaks vibes for me. And then, like you said, he drives away, and then he drives back. That's all very Lynchian. That was the one that I was like, oh yeah, this is a Hugo movie.
Yeah. That stuff is fun for me, but I agree. He's kind of the weak link, I think, of the main characters.
So, real quick about that little moment, Grizz. I'm going to say something that may sound unkind about the movie, but moments like that, and also a few other moments that are similar, like I'm thinking of the final scene at the football field with Laura and Brendan. The editing is such that, this is how you would edit this scene. You would, show Brendan's reaction, you show him getting closer, then you go back to Brendan, then go back to the guy. And, Rian Johnson clearly has a good sense of cinematic language to do those shots and edit, in that kind of way. But, the footage doesn't quite match that editing style, if that makes sense. It kind of makes it feel a little off kilter and weird, like you just said, like Lynchian. And, the same thing happens with Brendan and Laura at the end. It's cutting back and forth between them quickly, but, again, their reactions aren't the footage you have doesn't quite work for going back and forth the way that he does, but that's how you would do this scene, but that's not how they got it on the day, kind of. So it does kind of make it feel a little off kilter, maybe a little amateurish, but like
they're editing with what they have, I guess.
And that's what I was. That's what I wanted to say about another scene.
Just to point out, this movie does not have an editor. Like, Rian Johnson did the editing himself. So
that makes sense.
Well, there was another scene that really stood out to me as poorly edited. Was Brendan is lying on the cement, like lying on the concrete, and he's like, pounding his fist, and he's like yelling, but it keeps
Laura
cutting
behind him,
with Laura behind him. It keeps cutting between multiple takes. It's obviously that it was from multiple takes, and it just didn't mesh together well. And so I
think they did that a few times, though. I think also after Dode gets shot, they do the same thing. Yes. And, like, I guess my defense of that is, like, it's a heightened emotional thing, and, like, the room is spinning or whatever. Like, that's, like, I guess an artistic defense of that. But, like, I agree that's probably just multiple takes.
And I thought that's kind of... I thought that was my reasoning for why they could get away with that as well. But I feel like it was missing... some sort of like auditory cue to like that show that's like a jarring mental thing, or even like a shake of the camera, like even if it was added in post, that would kind of disguise the cuts. I think that would have helped. That
because of the limitations the movie had, there are moments like that where you're not entirely sure if a decision was a creative decision or if it was to adjust to the footage that they had. And I understand how that can kind of take you out of the movie. That there are a few scenes like that feel a little jarring in that way. Okay, let's talk about kind of how the story comes together in the end.
The third act.
Yeah, we find out that the brick, the titular brick, is like a brick of heroin. That the Pin had 10 of these, and he was like slowly cutting them and selling them. We do find out that one was stolen and it was cut in the wrong way, and so somebody OD'd on it and went into a coma, a character that we don't see but is mentioned a few times. And basically it all comes down to this weird this showdown at the tunnel where the body was initially found, where Dode goes there because he believes Brendan killed Emily, and but Tug is also there, and the Pin is also there because Dode has promised them to tell him something, and we don't know who knows what and who thinks what, and it turns out Tug was the one who killed Emily, and Tug kills Dode in a really cool shot. I mean, I think it's one of the most impressive shots of the movie when we do the reverse of the entrance of the tunnel. Shoots Dode, kills him, and at this point we get this weird like feud between Toad and the Pin, because the Pin doesn't want the heat from a murder. They talk about war happening, which is always a bit goofy because it's just high school kids, but I mean, whatever, it kind of fits into what the movie's going for. And Brendan basically arranges this meeting between the Tug and the Pin, between Tug and the Pin, to he frames it as, oh, we're going to meet, we're going to resolve the issue, and so we're not going to shoot each other for no reason. But actually he plants the body that he'd stashed earlier in the movie to not get the cops involved into the car, into Tug's car, and then has Brain call the police on them. So I think this is a good way of using noir tropes where the detective knows who did it, he knows what the right thing is, he knows what at least the general definition of what is just should be, and so he plants the body. He does something illegal in order to get the right result. Right, so he frames them technically, but they go down for stuff that they actually did. So he basically manages to get somebody for the murder and stop the drug trafficking that was happening. I thought that was a really cool use of a trope. I liked all that stuff. And then we get the final scene with the confrontation with Laura, which we already mentioned, where he's kind of spells out everything that she did, being behind this whole situation. She manipulated everyone to basically steal the brick herself and try to make money off it. We see the cool scene where he gives a note to the VP, and we see the police going to her locker and finding the brick. That's all cool stuff for me. And it's interesting that he guesses everything right except for one thing. We find out that actually the child, Emily was pregnant, and the child wasn't Dode's, it wasn't Tug's, it was actually Brendan's. She was actually 3 months pregnant, and Laura was trying to benefit from all this, but she wasn't actually trying to get her killed, which is, I guess, the final twist of the movie. I really like how these final scenes come together. I think the montage, while he's talking to her, and we see the montage of, or the quick cutaways of him putting the letter underneath the door, and the police going to find the brick, and just the idea of him planting the evidence to get these people who actually did it. I really like that stuff.
Good plan. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do feel because he's a very reserved character, but I do kind of feel the emotion at the end of him realizing, oh, damn, okay, there's an extra layer to this death, which again is also very film noirish. Like, he succeeded, but he's left,
but at what
feeling
cost?
Terrible. Yeah. So
he's alone.
So what do you guys think of the ending? I think it was probably one of my favorite parts overall. It drags a little bit in the middle. I agree with you. There's some parts that just don't really mesh well together, don't work together. But I thought the beginning of the movie and the ending of the movie were quite strong.
Who wants to go first? I'll go.
Grizz.
So there are. I like it overall, but I do have a couple of issues, like with the battle between Tug and the Pin. I guess I don't fully understand why they went to war with each other. Like, obviously Tug messed up, but like, why did that mean that Tug and the Pin were now enemies? I didn't catch that.
Because I think the point is that
he took a brick, didn't he?
No.
Did Tug?
At one point, the Pin thought he got a brick, but he actually didn't. I think the bricks were always stolen by Laura, who messed it up.
But that's what it is. It was the missing brick is why the Pin thought
initially
Tug was
the missing brick, but actually what it was is that the Pin didn't want to be involved in a murder. Like, he got mad at him for shooting Dode, and I mean, Dode had the information, and then he not only he shot Dode, but he also killed Emily. And I think the Pin is being presented in this movie as trying to present himself as more ruthless than he actually is. Where
he's a guy playing drug lord.
Yeah, he just wants to make money off the drugs. He doesn't want to be involved in the extra violence. I think that's why he wants to cut him off, and he kind of threatens to like tell the police or something. But yeah, whenever they talk about war, I find it really goofy because it's just kids.
Yes, Josh.
But at the same time, one thing I said earlier is that to the extent that I understand, I don't care. I struggle to like kind of get the stakes of stuff that's happening in a minute-to-minute kind of way. But I do appreciate how they build up, even without knowing like all the details or like being a little lost on some of the details. I still understand how they build up stakes in this final confrontation. Like the fact that he's setting up this meeting between the two and it's dangerous and tempers are high, and he's like clearly setting up some kind of insurance policy with these phone calls to Brain, but like you're not exactly sure what the specifics of that are. And then like the confrontation in the Pin's basement at the end, when it's, Tug versus the Pin and Brendan between them, and that all works, even though I kind of don't get the specifics of the war or why they'd be going to war or like who exactly double crossed to. I at least understand it's a high tense, situation, And
then the final confrontation with Laura. Again, we've already touched on that it was just it was a little too much show. A little too much tell and not enough show. Because I didn't necessarily get to see everything that she did, and so it was a little like, oh, okay, I guess that's like how it worked.
In a movie, I feel like in a movie with a budget, you would have cut out one of the subplots, and you would have seen her do some of the things that we are told she did.
Yeah.
Even if just in a cool montage.
Or even if if they had shown her doing something, but like not shown her face, not shown any distinguishing features, just something to indicate that there's another party.
Yeah.
I
agree. Doing
something that might have helped set this up a little bit more. But in this final scene, the only complaint I have in the actual scene itself is that I never really bought into them as a romantic thing, and I think we're supposed to feel that way about them. Like, she's got the tear running down her face, and kissing him, and all that stuff. So I don't know. What did you think, Josh?
I didn't really buy it either, but I didn't really buy anybody liking this dude, like,
fair.
let alone multiple women. Here's a question. If there was a guy like Brendan at your high school, would you have been friends with him?
I don't know.
Absolutely
No,
not. This
absolutely
dude
not.
seems so freaking insufferable.
And it's funny, like
I realize it's heightened, but
I didn't realize, and it's kind of cool now that you mention it, that like he wears his sweatshirt and like hunches his shoulders in the way like a trench coat. Knowing that, like, oh, I can see that. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is just like a closed off individual who does not seem friendly.
It's a bit of both, for sure.
Yeah,
like he's standoffish,
but like
with everyone.
With the trench coat, it's a cool look. With with him doing in this, it's just like, you know, the kind of kid that you're like, you want to be nice to, because you think
what's going on? Like, why are you so mad?
Why are you so grumpy?
Yeah. yeah, I could see that. Okay. But yeah, I think overall, just as final thoughts, I think I tune into the mood of this movie a lot. The way in which it's offbeat and kind of Lynchian is kind of, I'm a mark for it, and so I really enjoy it. But I think having the conversation sort of helped me see some criticisms, like not saying, oh, I like it less because you guys talked me down, but like I think it's an interesting conversation because it's stuff that I maybe didn't notice as much, just because I was in on the tone and the mood, and so I didn't notice some of these issues as that you guys point out. But,
which is a sign of if you don't want to say it's a great movie, it's a sign of a good movie that like it can disguise some of its flaws in really effective ways.
For sure. Yeah. I think it's obviously the most interesting thing about it is, as we said at the beginning, like it's very impressive for a movie made by a first, as a directorial debut and for the budget that it was made in, which I think we all agree on. So absolutely. I don't know. If you guys have any final thoughts, otherwise we can rank the movie.
I'm ready to rank.
Good movie. Let's rank it.
Good movie. Okay, I'll start. I guess I'll probably be the highest on it. Definitely be the highest on it, but I would put it below Andy and above Rudy. So at number 25.
You just put everything ahead of Rudy, don't you?
Everything's better than Rudy.
No, I think there's a chunk of movies. There's a chunk of movies there in the middle that I just kind of don't care about as much.
It's hard to put them in an order sometimes.
Yeah, it's like Her Majesty's Secret Service, Batman Max the Phantasm, Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and 127 Hours, and Rudy are. I like them, but this one kind of I don't know. I'm more tuned into the genre, I guess. I don't know.
Sure.
Well, for me,
Grizz?
I'm gonna put it just below The Matrix Reloaded, which we've said many, many times. That's my line of demarcation. Yep. And just below that, number 37 on the list, just ahead of Sweeney Todd, but below Matrix Reloaded.
I think that's fair.
And I'm going to put it, the lowest of the three of us, at number 41, just behind Iron Man 3, just ahead of Sugarland Express. So our three rankings are 25, 37, and 41, which averages out to 34.33333333. So I think that makes it after Anadun.
Yep, I would agree.
So it goes below Anhadhun, and I mean, I don't know if you pronounce it that way, and above The Trial of the Chicago 7. So yeah.
All right, there it is.
There it is.
The list.
It's on the list.
This was a fun pick. I'm glad you picked this.
Me too. I'm glad.
Lots to recommend about it.
It's, if anything, it's an interesting sort of. If you're getting into film and you want to see what can be done with like a really small budget and from a really interesting director, I think this is one of the movies that you should watch. So yeah. So anyway, what are we doing next week? Next week's film to remember is going to be picked by Jeff Grizz.
Jeff Grizz. Yes, that is correct. So continuing with our plan of selecting movies to go back and look at based on movies we're most anticipated for. My most anticipated movie of the year is The Northman, and that's Robert Eggers. And so we're going to go back and we're going to watch The Lighthouse, which I know...
Or in your case, see The Lighthouse for the first time.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I know that Hugo and Josh both have already seen it and like it, but for me this will be my first time watching it. So I'm excited to dive into this, especially since it is a break from my norms, and so it'll be very interesting.
It's a break from everybody's norms. Let me say that much.
Yeah, it's a break from norms, I would say.
Yes. It's a break.
There you go. Anyway, where can people find you guys? Grizz, give me some plugs.
You can find me on twitch.tv/goodgamegrizz. Trying to drive to 200 followers before my birthday on April 15th, so if you haven't already, please hit that follow button. You can also find me on Twitter and on letterboxd at goodgamegrizz as well.
And Josh?
You can find me on Twitter at @thesloopjoshb, and you can find me on YouTube, Movies I Love, So Can You, and that's it.
Go check out Josh's birdcage video. Watch the birdcage.
Yes.
Too.
Oh, thanks, man.
And also,
yeah, do that if you like.
Find me at Hugo_Pinay on Twitter, at just Hugo Pinay on Letterboxd. You can listen to this month's episode of Large Pop Pum that I'm going to be on with this month's movie club, which is Thirst, insane Park Chan-wook movie. If you haven't watched it, I mean, try to look it up before if you want to decide to watch it or not, but whatever. Follow RTF_pod on Twitter.
Thank you.
Do not follow RTF pod, our arch enemies. If anything, please, block them on Twitter. That's important.
Just block
them. Report them.
Please report them as well. Yeah, absolutely, for something. I'm sure there's reasons to report them. For stealing our name. And we'll see you next week with The Lighthouse.
Woo.
Bye.